So what we're going to do now is we're going to install the CSS framework that we're going to be using to provide us with some styling assistance for our application. Now the one that we're going to use for this particular application is Bootstrap. It's probably the most popular CSS framework there is, and it's pretty simple and straightforward to use, and it's going to save us from writing a whole bunch of CSS just to lay out the content on our page. Now the current version of Bootstrap is currently at version 4.3.1. and that's the version that we'll use inside here. What we also want is an icon set as well, and what we'll use for the icons is font awesome. And if you've never seen Bootstrap before, if we just take a look at the examples, this is the kind of look and feel we get with the pretty much default Bootstrap styling. But it will save us a bunch of time rather than typing out our own CSS to achieve a layout that we want in our application. So what we'll do is we'll just head back to VS Code, and I'll just open up the terminal. And what we can do is we can just open up a new terminal session. And what we want to do, and this is really important, we need to cd into our client application before we run npm install. It's not a big deal if you do run npm install at a higher level, it's just that you'll end up having, alongside your two projects here, you'll end up having an additional node modules folder along with a package.json file in here as well. If you do accidentally do that, it's not a big deal, you just need to come in here and delete them from this particular folder, as we just want to keep our client stuff inside our dating app-spa. So what we want to do here is we want to say npm install, and we want Bootstrap. And if we don't specify a particular version, it's just going to grab the latest released version that's available at the moment, and this will be 4.3.1. And what we also want is font awesome. And we'll just press return, and this is going to go ahead and install both of those packages. And we get a couple of warnings in this case, and I just want to clarify what these are. Now, Bootstrap itself provides components that have functionality. And if I just go back to the documentation and we just take a look at something inside here, and I take a look at the components, and if I take a look at a drop down, for example, and I'll find an example, then what gives this the functionality just by clicking on this button is jQuery and JavaScript. Bootstrap comes with a JavaScript file itself, but that particular JavaScript file relies on jQuery. And what we don't want to do is install jQuery into our application. And I've no doubt you're thinking, well, why can't we install jQuery? Well, actually, technically we can. There's nothing to stop us from using jQuery inside our application and just using this normal Bootstrap functionality. But if I did do that, I would be fielding a lot of questions asking me why I've used jQuery. And if you search on Google for should I use jQuery with an Angular project, then you'll enter the world of debate between those that say it's no problem and those that say you shouldn't. When you're creating an Angular project, stick with Angular components rather than using jQuery, which is another JavaScript library. And it's not a small JavaScript library, but it's kind of been around for a very, very long time now. And it's just a way of manipulating our DOM directly using JavaScript. But we already have a way to do that using Angular. And what we'll look at a bit later is using an Angular version of Bootstrap, which is going to provide us with components that give us this functionality without needing to use jQuery. And that's the approach we'll take on this course. We'll keep our Angular application as pure as possible by using Angular components and not using a JavaScript library like jQuery to add the functionality here. So the annoying thing is, though, is that this warning will never go away unless we change the Bootstrap package.json file directly. And we're not going to do that. So this is just a warning, and it's not going to affect our usage of Bootstrap here. And what we should find is that both Bootstrap and Font Awesome were installed successfully. So what we can do now is tell our Angular project about them. And what we can do is we can just go back to, let's just open up Solution Explorer for this. And one of the files inside here that we referred to earlier was angular.json. And if we take a look at inside this particular file, then what we have here is a styles array and the scripts array. And technically what we can do inside here is add additional style imports into this styles array. And because this is our Angular configuration, is that when we compile our application, any styles.css file or any CSS file listed inside here also gets compiled and injected into our index.html file so that we have access to the global style sheets for our application. Now, we're not actually going to use this particular styles array because what I've found is that the ordering of what we specify something inside here isn't respected by the compiler, and we'd lose our control over what style sheets we want to load first. And CSS is cascading, hence its name, cascading style sheets, and we want the ability to overwrite a particular style at a lower level, but we kind of lose that ability if we populate this styles array. So what we can do though is we can import the files we need into the styles.css, our global style sheets, and that's what we'll do to get around that particular problem. So let's open up styles.css, and what it says inside here is we can add global styles to this file and also import other style files. And there's two that we need at this stage. We'll add the imports, so we'll say @imports, and then we'll go up to node modules. And the IntelliSense is not bad actually inside this particular file, and we'll search for Bootstrap. And I just as I said the IntelliSense was not bad, it immediately stopped working, but now it's back again. And we want to get the dist, and then the CSS, and then we want to get the bootstrap.min.css from inside here. And we also want to do the same for Font Awesome as well, so we'll go up to node modules, and then Font Awesome, and CSS, and then we want to get the fontawesome.min.css and save this particular file. And what we'll do is we'll just go back to our app component HTML and just make a few minor changes inside here. And I'll just remove the styling from this particular div. And what I'll also do is just change the title from welcome to app, and we'll just give it a temporary title of dating app inside our h1 tag. And if we go and take a look at our application now, then we can see that our Bootstrap font has been applied because it looks slightly different to what it did earlier, and our values have moved over to the left hand side as well. So now we've spent all this time and effort configuring this amazing looking application, what we want to take a look at next is source control, so that we save all of our changes into a safe place, and it'll give us a place to come back to if something goes wrong. And what we'll do next is we'll introduce Git and save all of our code changes into source control. And that's coming up next.